Hello and welcome to Teach Online TV. My name is Tyler Basu and I am joined by a very special guest today. Her name is Esther Kiss, and she is the founder of a company called Born to Influence, which is a publicity and marketing agency. And she helps experts and personal brands get exposure by getting them in media outlets. And we're talking about every kind of outlet: podcasts, online radio shows, YouTube, webinars, telesummits, traditional media like TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, and all that stuff. So we've got a lot of good stuff to cover here. But the main thing is we're going to help our audience, Thinkific's audience, get the word out about their brand, about their courses, and just be really strategic with their media appearances. So Esther, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to share some of these publicity strategies here.
So why don't we start with why you got involved in this? Why did you create? Why are you offering this as a service? And what inspired you to help other entrepreneurs get featured in the media?
I wish I could say that it was a very strategic plan, but it really was. It was very much like going from queue to queue to queue, like on a treasure hunt, just finding the next right move, the next right thing. I used to be an actor. I moved to LA to become an actor and, did the whole thing for a few years. And to support myself, I really didn't want to be a waiter. Like most out of work actors are waiters. And I'm like, nah, that's not for me. So I have a background in business. And so I would research really early in the morning and find the news and do some stock trading online. And that was all good and well until the recession hit. And I'm like, okay, now what am I going to do? And so I knew something had to change. And basically, I was doing anything and everything I could to get clients to go back to my roots in business and help entrepreneurs with their marketing strategies. But because I have spent 5 years in the entertainment industry, most of my friends were actors and producers. They were not entrepreneurs. So I'm like, okay, I need to build relationships here. I really need to focus on that, and we'll figure out what the business will be. And so with my good friend Meta Miller, we launched a podcast called Born to Influence. And the whole point was to connect with high-level influencers and very successful entrepreneurs, New York Times bestselling authors like Gary Vaynerchuk and Perry Marshall, people like that, interview them, see what they need, talk to them, and then we'll see what the business will be. And so every time I interviewed someone on the show, after we stopped the recording, I would ask them that, hey, would you like to be on other shows as well? Just to help them, to invest in the relationship. And they would always say yes. So I would start introducing them, getting them all this media. And at some point, it just turned into an actual business.
Okay. No, that's great. So you identified that need that entrepreneurs are out there. They're looking for exposure. They're doing interviews. You had a podcast, which was the perfect platform that you could give them exposure, but you could also then connect them to other podcasters and other outlets. And pretty soon, you just added a price to that and started charging.
Yes. One of my clients literally told me that, hey, can you help this guy? But this time you have to charge for it. And I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah. That's great. So what I want to talk about why entrepreneurs should make having an appearance in the media, whether it's podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever outlets they make an appearance on, but why that's so important. So in your experience and from what you've seen with entrepreneurs who maybe go from not having any exposure at all, not getting their name out there, to then getting interviews and being on podcasts, being featured in magazines, things like that, what kind of an impact does that have on somebody's business when they start doing that consistently?
Being in the media can be really, really incredible as long as you go into it with a clear plan of what you're actually looking to accomplish. Based on what your offer is and based on where you're at in your business, you might be going after traditional media because you want those big name logos and have the credibility, or you might want to do podcasts, and they are not necessarily as fancy for the casual observer, but in fact, they can have a really, really big impact on your bottom line. I mean, some of my clients literally made millions of dollars just by being interviewed on podcasts and then retargeting them on Facebook. So getting clear on, do I want credibility right now? Do I want leads and sales? Do I want to use it as a networking opportunity, right? To connect with other influencers and find collaboration partners for future promotions. There's just so many things that you might set as goals. And once you get clear on that, then you would choose what type of outlets to go after.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So we're working backwards from what the goal is.
Yes.
So with our case, because our customers, have online courses, and sometimes there are other parts of their business as well. They might have, coaching or consulting or books, in-person events, live events, things in addition to their courses. But they do have products and services that they are trying to sell. And so we always say, it's important. You got to get the word out. You got to spread the word somehow. But usually, if you're interviewed in media, you're not there to sell,
Right.
right? You're there to add value, to get exposure for yourself. Selling happens later, usually outside of that environment. So with these specific media outlets, what are some of the typical goals that we should have if we're getting interviewed on, let's say a podcast, for example? What should be the goal with that interview? If it's not to try to get people to buy from us on the spot, but what should our goal be?
So you need to have three goals specifically for podcast interviews. One is to develop rapport with the host who you have, because if you make them look good, they have such a close relationship with their audience already that trust and that respect that they will have in return for you will also transfer to that audience. So automatically you are being built up just simply by creating rapport with your host. Number two is you gotta have a topic that is interesting to that audience. I see a lot of times people try to make the shoe fit, and they're trying to go for certain podcasts because it's a big one, it's a fancy one, but it's not necessarily relevant to their expertise, or they're not quite there at that level yet where they would be a good guest for that show. If they're interviewing 7-figure entrepreneurs and you're just starting out, probably it's not a good fit just yet. But
Right.
It's good to have the relationship with the podcaster if you can invest in that, and then over time, for sure, you will get those opportunities. So rapport is one. Number two is to make sure that you have a good topic that is good for that audience, and to come with a contribution mindset. You're there to serve, to share stories, entertain them, and that at the same time also to give actionable advice, because that way you will develop trust and rapport with that audience even more if they can apply those things and get results without having anything to do with you, without having paid you or opted into your list or anything like that. Or at least if they can see themselves applying those strategies and getting results, immediately they're like, oh my goodness, I need to know more about this person. And that's where the third tip comes in. You have to have a giveaway, something that will help you build your email list, a freebie downloadable cheat sheet or a checklist or a video series or a webinar, whatever you might have that would be relevant to the topic that you're talking about on that interview. It can be something completely unrelated, right? It needs to be something that helps that audience, and it also the next logical step is to go and take you up on that freebie.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So instead of asking the audience of something, you offer something to give them, offer something of value that of course gets them to your website and on your newsletter, and that's where you can build the relationship further afterwards, because you would then have permission to contact them after
That's
that.
right. The only exception, I would say there is one, because you mentioned that some of your audience have consulting and coaching, and some have live events. If you have a live event, assuming you cleared it with the host first, that makes sense to actually mention when and where, and maybe even what the price is, or if you're doing a giveaway or reduced tickets or something on that offer. Make sure that you clear it with the host, but that would make sense to actually say it because this is time sensitive.
Right. Okay, no, that makes sense. So how do you suggest that we go about choosing where we should try to be interviewed or where we should try to be featured? I mean, how do we know if it's the right fit, if it has the right audience? What are some of the clues that you would look for?
To choose the right media outlets, you gotta know first where your own audience hangs out. You gotta understand what their habits are, what kind of influencers do they gather around, who do they follow, and what kind of podcasts or magazines do they read and listen to, what kind of blogs are they on, what type of Facebook groups do they belong to. And a really simple way to check about this is either to ask them in person in your conversations with your clients, or put a Facebook post and ask them, hey, what are some of your favorite podcasts or what kind of magazines you read? Or you could do a formal survey to your list. And then once you have a few names, for example, for podcasts, you might put in iTunes in the search the name of that podcast, the title of the show, and then automatically underneath there will be similar ones that share audiences with them. So it's very similar to Amazon. When you buy on Amazon something, they say that people who bought this also bought this. Yep. iTunes will do the same thing for podcasts. So you can actually find relevant shows just by having one, and then it will take you through the other ones that have similar audiences as well.
Okay, no, that makes sense. We're trying to figure out, start with the audience, start with who our target audience is, find out where they're actually going to get information and to listen to interviews and so on. So that's really helpful, especially online, because we know online, I mean, there are those niches, right? There's little pockets on the internet where people who want to learn about a specific topic, they kind of hang out. There's Facebook groups for them, there's podcasts for them, there's blogs and so on. When does it make sense to try to reach out to traditional media? Like now we're talking, radio, newspapers, even large magazines, because they reach a lot of people, but it might not necessarily be, the right people. It's more, it's less targeted. It's more mass market, mass distribution. So are there situations where it makes sense to try to get featured in traditional media? And if we get featured there, what are some of the advantages of that?
I love this question. So depending on who you are and what your market is, it could be that the numbers are bigger in traditional media, but they're not as targeted. And that would be the case for most online entrepreneurs and most coaches, except if you have an offer or some kind of a business that is good for the general consumer. So for example, if you're a weight loss expert or a fitness coach or something like that, a personal trainer, it makes sense from a lead generation perspective as well to do broadcast media, like, for example, TV, because their audiences, people who watch the news, who are general stay-at-home moms, people who have time to watch TV. They're not the busy entrepreneurs who are looking at how do I get an extra 0.5% conversion on my sales page. That's going to be definitely a niche thing for podcasts, right? But so traditional media, if one of your goals is to have the credibility to be able to say that, hey, I've been featured on ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox, Entrepreneur Magazine, the Huffington Post, like all those things, that's great because it will help you with exposure and up levels your credibility. So when you do your Facebook advertising, when you do your organic social media posts or referrals, however, people are finding out about you for the first time and they go to your website, they see all those media logos and the impression of who you are and how good you must be is automatically higher because of that credibility. So from that perspective, absolutely traditional media makes sense. If you're an author and you have a book, NPR affiliated stations or radio shows, that's amazing for book sales. TV is great for online entrepreneurs for doing news segments that are relevant to your expertise. But then you would take that little clip, put it on Facebook and start showing it, and your friends will start commenting and sharing in your audience. Now you know who engaged with your post. Now you can retarget them with the offers that you have. So you can leverage it into your marketing.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I see this especially on the websites of entrepreneurs and personal brands. If they've been featured on a large publication, they put it there. I mean, even if it was, they were just quoted in an article or it was a quick interview, but now there's that social proof that they were once interviewed or they were once featured on that publication. So it brings a lot of social proof. And I really like that you're then going and saying, if you get featured on a large publication, if you get an interview somewhere, promote that to your audience, share it on Facebook, even run ads to that. And then that way you can leverage that, that one appearance, that one engagement, and try to get a lot more reach and value from it afterwards.
And for entrepreneurs, especially if you haven't done much publicity before or not at all, sometimes it can feel like, oh my goodness, this is a scary thing. How do I find out and how do I connect with producers? What do I say? How do I pitch with editors and journalists? Yeah. Once you do just one or two, you get a hang of it. You know that it's really, they're just human beings and they want to connect with you. They're looking for content for their audience. So you're actually helping them. And at the same time, for everyone else in your audience who hasn't done much media yet, the cool factor is still there. So when you start sharing, the halo effect still works for you. So the likes and the shares will work in to your advantage.
Right, right. Now, you bring up a good point, especially for those who are getting started. Maybe they're a bit nervous about going out and being interviewed and so on. So what are some tips you could give around preparing for an interview? I mean, what can we do maybe before the interview to get ready for it, and even during an interview to make sure that we do a good job and we don't, make a fool of ourselves, I guess?
Yes, I love this question. So, number one that you want to have in place for sure is understanding what that audience is looking for. So, for example, with you, when we were preparing for this interview and even for blog posts that we talked about, I asked a bunch of questions about your audience because I want to know what would actually help them and bring them value. Second, you need to know about your own following, your own community, your ideal clients. Where are they at in their head? What are the questions that they have? What is the conversation that's going on? What is the problem that they think they're facing? They might not exactly face the actual problem because maybe, let's just say if it's weight loss and you know that the real issue here is mindset and self-worth, but they are thinking the calorie counting and how much they're going to exercise, that's the question that you need to address, right?
Okay.
And by the way, once you reframe it in your mind and then you bring in the mindset topic. So you got to meet them where they're at. And so to do that, you would prepare something that we call your intentional media message content, IMMC. It's a process that I've developed. It's literally a set of specific questions where you go through this and understand what are some of the questions that your prospects and your clients have when, for example, they consider for the first time working with you. What are some of those things that they usually bring up as objections, or how do you pre-frame the situation when you're doing a sales call, for example? What are some of their desires, their frustrations, their dreams? And once you have that list, now you go a level deeper and find out, okay, what is the emotional frustration underneath? What is that validation that they need? And now, once you have the emotional things, you identify stories in your own life and case studies and examples from your clients that would address those emotional triggers. And that's what you're going to share in your interviews.
That's great. And, I like that because people remember stories. I mean, if you come
Yes.
out and share some facts or some figures or some research or whatever, they'll probably forget it pretty quickly. But if you share a story to back up whatever advice or data you presented, then I think people they'll remember the story and probably relate to a story a lot better than anything else as well.
Yes, yes. And because we grew up with stories as little kids, our parents hopefully told us some bedtime stories. So we relate to that. But your job as an interview guest is really to do both. Most interviewers, especially in the online space, are not professional journalists. They didn't have the opportunity to have that training. So they tend to be asking questions based on what they are interested in or what they think is really relevant to their audience. But it's going to be either very story heavy or very how to. Tell me exactly what to do. And so your job as the interview guest is to do both, to marry the two. And so, for example, if somebody asks you a how-to question, you answer that and you illustrate it with an example, that will be a story. Or if they tell you that, hey, tell me a story when, you tell the story and then you back it up with your facts and with the how-to or the tips or the takeaways. So people don't just have the intellectual entertainment, but they're like, this is how I apply it for my own self.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I've got a how-to question.
Oh, good.
How can somebody approach, or how can they pitch? How can they pitch themselves to podcast hosts, to writers of magazines, and so on? What goes into a good pitch, so that when we present ourselves to these media outlets, they can figure out pretty quickly if they'd like to use us or not.
Very good question. So number one is the relationship. I would say 99% of the time, and specifically in the online space with podcasters and bloggers, work on the relationship first and don't just go with a cold pitch, because they already, especially if it's a popular show, they get so many requests to be featured there. If you can have a friendship and a level of rapport with that person first, and then find out what they're working on, what kind of topics do they look to cover on that show or in that blog series, then you know that, okay, I have some resources and I have value here to offer, or maybe I don't, but I can recommend someone else, and you make that introduction. So look at the relationship first. It's not as well, I don't want to say it's not important, but it's not as necessary for mainstream media, like for TV and for radio and that kind of thing, because they are much more news-based. Online, online publications tend to be covering evergreen content. So there it's really about your story and your expertise and your how-to tips. And so when you're looking to reach out, you and what to include in your pitch. First of all, you would want to make sure that it's a good fit for what you have value to offer around. And then you would say that, hey, let's just say you pitch somebody, I was reading your blog on this particular topic, and you would link to that article that they posted, or I listened to your podcast episode and you link to the episode that they posted. And it really resonated with me because, and you would tell them why. And in one sentence, in the opening of your email, you immediately establish rapport with them, and they feel good because they know that they actually made a difference for you and with the work that they're doing, and you're not just giving them a compliment for compliment's sake, right?
Right.
And so then the next step is to say that, hey, I was thinking that this would be a really cool topic too, based on, connect the two together with what you want to pitch. For your audience, I thought that this would be very valuable for them. What do you think about doing an interview on, and then 2 or 3 bullet points of specific topics? And here you put your copywriter hat on and you think about how to, or, something that would be really catchy, no, not in a clickbaity way, but something that people would want to click on. Because think about it, this editor, this journalist, this podcaster is also looking to get ratings for their show, for TV, get ratings, to get clicks. So you want to make it so that it's attractive. They can see it from their audience's perspective that this would be a good topic. And then just ask them, hey, what do you think? Right? Let me know if you would like to set up an interview. Very simple. Don't make it a whole long thing because that makes it very difficult. For broadcast media, it's got to be tied into something that they're talking about in the news. It's got to have a hook that is either timely or local or related to a celebrity, or it might cite some studies that you can back up through real statistics, things like that, where they say, why is it important right now to talk about this?
Those are some great tips. I mean, especially with reaching out to podcasters and some of the online mediums. I like that you're saying start off with a sincere compliment, like listen to their show before you reach out to them. Tell them you listen to a certain episode or you listen to a certain interview. Here's why you liked it. Here's how it helped you. And suggest a couple of topics that you could potentially speak. And so would it be good to even like, let's say we're trying to get onto a podcast, should we probably look at like all of the different topics that have been discussed and then try to find something that hasn't been discussed yet, or maybe like a new take on a past topic, or just
the latter for sure. Yes,
yeah. Okay.
Take. If you can, that's always for any media outlet. If you can bring something that is unique, that may be a topic that they cover regularly, but you have a fresh angle, there is no reason why they shouldn't consider you. Because if you bring something that is of value, that is consistently of an interesting topic to their audience, but also has a different perspective, they're like, wow, I never thought about this in this way. So that's good. As far as looking for podcasts to see that exactly what topics they have covered, and then now I want to do something additional, that would work if podcasters didn't have like a whole big bank of unpublished episodes, because just putting in all the time to do the deep research for all the different shows that you could possibly pitch yourself for, and maybe they already planned 2 or 3 Facebook ads episodes, and you're a Facebook expert, right? That they just haven't published yet. Then saying this, that, hey, I saw that you haven't done anything on this topic yet. How about it? It's going to fall flat. So you just start with the relationship first and ask them simply, what kind of topics are you looking to cover in the next 2 to 3 months? Once you know that, that's when you suggest something of yourself.
Okay. That makes sense. So I wanted to talk about, leveraging our media appearances to, build our lists, generate sales for our products and services. And you've touched on it briefly already, but what are some of your preferred ways or your favorite ways to, let's say somebody has been consistently appearing, on publications, on podcasts, they're getting quoted in magazines, maybe even some traditional media. So they're getting the exposure, they're building their brand, they're building the authority, the social proof is all there. It's they're doing a good job of making these appearances. So what do they do next? How can they leverage these appearances to make sure that it's actually helping them grow their business?
So number one is always to share it with your own community. If you have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a blog, anything like that, you can share it over and over again, especially on social media, right? You might not want to post about it on your blog 5 times, but you can take out little snippets. You can make image quotes. You can just say that, hey, I was so excited to be interviewed on this particular show. Most people will consume social media content in their newsfeed, not on your page. So just putting it once, the majority of your audience, 90% plus, will actually not see that. So from that perspective, if you just put it once today and then bring it up again, 2 weeks from now, maybe a month from now, every so often you recycle, as long as it's not something super time sensitive. If you had a Thanksgiving kind of interview and it's now February, probably not going to talk about it, right?
Right.
Something that is evergreen, definitely you want to use over and over again in your social media. Email it out to your list and use it to get even more media. So for example, when I did with you guys with Thinkific, we did a telesummit, right? And then you featured all the speakers on the telesummit in a Huffington Post article. Now, guess what I did with that? I went and emailed TV producers, and then, oh, by the way, she was featured in, as one of the top 50 women entrepreneurs to follow in 2017. That was a very catchy title. I linked to that in the TV pitches and landed a couple of TV interviews partially because of that.
Nice.
So you always want to use your media appearances to get even more media. And then number 3 is you can use it for advertising. So you can literally actually run either ads to it and retarget those people who engage with this content, or you can use it in your marketing funnel. Like, for example, if you have a webinar funnel, people opt in to get your freebie. Now they register for the webinar that's coming up in a few days. You're anyway sending them email reminders. Imagine when you supplement that with interviews. It's in your autoresponder that here I was in a podcast, here I was featured in the Huffington Post, here I was on TV. From the perspective of the person who just opted in, it's like, wow, this guy is everywhere. They really know their stuff. And you're strategic with your content that you're sharing. So it's not always the same thing. There is always a golden nugget that's unique to that show only. And they feel like, wow, I'm always learning something new here. And so your conversions on your webinar will be much, much better because of that.
No, that's exciting. And it sounds like, once you get going with this stuff, it really fuels itself. Like one interview leads to more interviews. Running ads to your interviews leads to more people on your list, which you can then also send, to the next interviews that you do. And it builds upon, it builds momentum having all these things in place.
Yes, and podcasts are so powerful because we've been talking about podcasts especially for online entrepreneurs. That's another thing. When you are able to share their interviews every so often, like not in an annoying way, definitely tag them. They'll be happy. They will retweet you if you leave a review on their show. And podcasters are always friends with other podcasters. Like I'm in several groups where some of them are literally thousands of podcasters in there. And so when one podcaster shares your interview and their friends, the other podcasters see it, they're like, oh, I want to listen to that episode. I should have this guest on my show too. So you will start getting the inbound requests as well.
Right. So what would you say stops most entrepreneurs from making this happen? What's the barrier? What's stopping them from going out and being strategic and being proactive and trying to get interviewed and featured in publications?
The number one thing is mindset, because it just seems so difficult because I've never done it before. It feels intimidating. Am I really good enough to be there? Do I have value to offer? So a lot of it is self-worth issues, but we don't think of it that way. We just put it kind of somehow on the outside that this is hard. This thing, the media thing, is difficult. So getting over that and reframing it for yourself and understand that they're human beings. They are looking for content, and not everybody will be collaborative, that's for sure. But most people, particularly in the online space, are. So if you just go with the contribution mindset, leading with the spirit of generosity and giving and value and offering to help them, it will help you start those relationships. So just get over yourself, stop being shy, and connect with human beings. And when the time is right, you'll pitch yourself. And once you have your first 1 or 2 or 3, you'll get the hang of it and it'll be fun. So then you will want to do more. So I would say just start with that first. Just get over yourself and start making friends.
Storm. No, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So Esther, I've just got one more question for you, and then we'll wrap up. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights and to help us cover this topic. But you're someone who's been sharing their knowledge. I mean, you've got courses, you've got training, you've got clients that you work with. You've been sharing, what you know about getting booked on the media and being strategic with media with other people for several years now. And so I'm just curious, because our audience are also people who are sharing what they know. They're creating courses, they're creating training, they have expertise that they want to teach to others, and you've been doing that. So what kind of an impact would you say that building this kind of a business where you're sharing your knowledge, you're helping other people by sharing your expertise, what kind of an impact has that made on your life?
Sharing what I know is it's put me to a place where doing work is actually fun, because I get to talk about what I like, and it's kind of like reverse gossip. I talk about all the good stuff that, oh my goodness, I can't wait for you guys to meet. Basically, that's essentially what I'm doing. But also on the how-to side, sharing how to do this and seeing how people light up and they take action, and they tell me that, hey, I have a meeting now with this writer who writes for the Huffington Post or for Forbes, and seeing those results is very, very rewarding. And financially, it's amazing. So I absolutely love this business model of coaching, consulting, info products, anything that you do where you can share your experience and your knowledge. It makes a difference. It makes an impact in the world, and it gives you a great way to support yourself as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Esther, thank you so much. I know you've got all kinds of resources and things that you can give to our audience. So is there anything in particular that you have that could help someone who they want to get featured in the media more, just help them prepare for that or get them ready for that? Is there anything that we could give our audience?
Yes, I do have a media positioning checklist that is a free one-page checklist that you can get that will help you with all the things that you need to get in a position where people actually want to interview you. Have a compelling bio. It teaches you how to do that, how to take the right headshots, what kind of freebie lead magnets to give away so that your interviews convert. You can get that at borntoinfluence.com/gift.
Okay, perfect. So I'll make sure I link to your website and to that checklist in the notes below the video, so that our listeners can go ahead and find that.
Thank you so much for having me, Tyler.
Yeah, no problem, Esther. It's been a pleasure. Thank you again, and I wish you all the best.